أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. إنه من يهديه الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أما بعد. Thank you for coming. So we'll continue, do a quick recap from last lesson, which was about the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. So Hudaybiyah began with a dream. The Prophet had a dream that he was performing Umrah. He went to perform Umrah. So he told the Muslims, the Sahaba, that they were all going to travel to Mecca to perform Umrah. And in total there were about between 1,400 and 1,500 Muslims and one munafiq with the whole group. And they travelled to Mecca as pilgrims, so wearing with the intention of not to fight, so they were lightly armed, not heavily armed, because the intention was to perform Umrah. The customs of the time, the Arabs, anybody could go to Mecca and perform Umrah or Hajj, anybody, according to the customs and the laws of the region. Quraysh did not have a monopoly over the Kaaba. They did not own it. Their job was to look after it, maintain it, and protect the pilgrims who came to Mecca. And according to the customs, including the Muslims, even the Prophet himself could go and do it. Even though they didn't want him to come. They didn't want any Muslims to come to Mecca. So the Muslims had the legal right to go to Mecca. The Muslims arrived at a place called Qura al-Ghamim, about 60 kilometers from Mecca, and this is where they met an army, a Qurayshi army, led by Khalid ibn al-Walid. The army's job was to stop the pilgrims from coming to Mecca, entering Mecca and forming Umrah. And the story is that it was time for the Dhuhr prayer, so the Muslims started praying, and while they were praying, the Qurayshi army with Khalid ibn Walid were just watching them. And Khalid ibn Walid is the first time he's seeing the Muslims praying, and he sees that the Muslims, he knows that they're praying, he sees that they're vulnerable because they're not fully attentive to their surroundings. He gets the idea that to attack them. But the prayer had finished by that time, so he finds out from the other people with him, that there's another prayer after this Dhuhr prayer called Asr prayer, and they'll be doing the same thing. So he has the intention of attacking the Muslims and slaughtering them while they're praying. At the same time, the Prophet receives revelation from Allah. So at the time of Asr prayer, the Prophet makes some changes. He initiates something called Salat al-Khawf. So half the group, I will call it an army, half the army will stand watching the enemy, and half the army will pray behind the Prophet while doing the 4 rak'ahs. When the Prophet as the Imam, when the Prophet reaches the middle, the tashahhud, the people behind him would get up, finish their prayer and get up and stand guard watching the enemy. And those who are standing guard will come and pray behind the Prophet. They finish the last 2 rak'ahs with the Prophet. And Khalid sees that this is during the Asr prayer. He understands that the Prophet the Muslims are protected by Allah. The Prophet has received revelation that this is what that he was probably going to do something, maybe attack them. And Khalid didn't even tell anybody what he intended to do. This was from the movie The Message. If anybody was here last time, can they tell me what's wrong with this scene? Sorry? Both what?
Something wrong with this scene, you say?
Yes. This is from The Message, and this is about the scene I just described. And? No one's praying. Number 1. Yes. Correct. So, they're all just standing there watching. That's it. But as I said, they were praying first Dhuhr and then Asr prayer. So the incident is over. The Muslims get up and go past the army and continue on to Mecca until they reach Hudaybiyah, and that's where the Prophet's camel, Al-Qaswa, sits down and refuses to budge, and nobody can get the camel to get up and keep moving. The Prophet ﷺ understood that. He said that Allah is the one controlling the camel, and the camel will not get up. This is a sign from Allah that they are now not to continue, they are to enter negotiations with Quraysh. So Quraysh starts sending some representatives, ambassadors, Budayl ibn Warqa al-Khuza'i, Al-Hulays ibn Alqama, Urwa ibn Mas'ud. Each time they try to negotiate something and they're not able to reach an agreement. The Prophet then instead understands that Quraysh want to negotiate with him. He sends Uthman, Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu, his son-in-law, to meet with Quraysh in Mecca. And Uthman was a very good choice for a number of reasons. And number one, mostly because he was intelligent, he was very good at negotiating. And number two, he was the son-in-law of the Prophet. Number three, he was from the tribe of Bani Umayyah, a very powerful tribe that could protect him, because he would be alone by himself in Mecca, pretty much the only Muslim in Mecca. Quraysh treat him very well, and so now Uthman stays in Mecca for 3 days. And Quraysh even offer Uthman to perform Umrah by himself, and Uthman rejects the offer. Back in the Muslim camp, the absence is noticed by the Muslims. They think maybe something bad has happened to Sayyidina Uthman. Maybe he's been killed. So the Prophet gets the whole group to make the pledge of Al-Hudaybiyah, pretty much to defend the Prophet with their lives. Because they're thinking if Uthman has been killed, then Quraysh have evil intentions. They're going to come out with another army and maybe fight and kill them. So they make that pledge to defend the Prophet with their lives, and they will not retreat, not run away. One thing I forgot to mention last time is that, the whole of 1,400 Muslims made that pledge. Uthman wasn't there amongst them, he was in Mecca. The Prophet did the pledge to himself on behalf of Uthman. Because the Prophet knew that Uthman, if he had been present, he would have made that pledge. That's how much he loved and trusted Sayyidina Uthman. The Quraysh then sent another ambassador, Suhail ibn Amr, to represent them. And they finally agreed for a treaty of Hudaybiyah. And there were 4 parts to it. Number one, they agreed that the Muslims would not proceed that year, that moment, with their Umrah, they would go home. And the following year they'll come back and they'll be permitted to enter Mecca and perform Umrah. Number two, there'll be a truce of 10 years. So no fighting for 10 years. And number three, other people, the other Arab tribes were free to ally themselves or even convert to Islam, or to ally themselves with Quraysh or the Muslims. Everybody was free. Before there was a state of war, anybody who would go to side with the Muslims would be targeted by Quraysh. Quraysh was a very powerful tribe. And the last part of the treaty was the contentious one. The Muslims did not see any benefit in that last one. Anybody running away from Quraysh, wanting to defect to the Muslims and join the Muslims and becoming a Muslim, the Muslims had to return them back to Quraysh, return them back. Whereas any person from any Muslim or anybody from Medina going to Quraysh, the Quraysh did not have to return them back to Medina. Allah described the treaty of Hudaybiyah as Fathan Mubina. Inna fatahna laka Fathan Mubina. When it came to writing down the treaty on paper, the Prophet dictated the 4 terms of the treaty to his cousin Sayyidina Ali. Ali was writing them down. And he began, the Prophet, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, And as soon as Suhail ibn Amr heard that, he said, "Who is Ar-Rahman? I do not recognize this name, change it." So the Prophet said, "Okay, we'll write Bismika Allahumma instead of Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim." And then he continues, and the treaty between Muhammad, the messenger of Allah, and he was going to say between him and Quraysh. Again, Suhail objected. He's saying, "If we had known you are the messenger of Allah, we wouldn't have fought you." So the Prophet instructed Sayyidina Ali to change it, to erase, because he had written Muhammad, messenger of Muhammad Rasulullah. He told him to erase Rasulullah. Sayyidina Ali replied, "I can't do it. I can't erase it." It was too difficult for him. So the Prophet erased it himself with his own hand. And he instructed him to put Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, Muhammad ibn Abdullah instead. And they wrote down the treaty, and everything is fine, and both sides the Prophet has accepted it, the Quraysh have accepted it. And this is when the first test of the Muslims' loyalty of the treaty starts. Abu Jandal was the son of Suhail ibn Amr, the ambassador of Quraysh. He'd converted, but he'd been kept a prisoner in Mecca, in his own home. And the father kept him prisoner in Mecca for a number of years. Abu Jandal finally manages to escape from Mecca, and he catches up with the Muslims at Hudaybiyah. And this is just after the treaty is signed. So Suhail said, according to the treaty, you have to return my son to me, because he's defecting from Mecca to the Muslims. The Prophet tried his best to make an exception for Abu Jandal. Suhail rejected, did not accept it. He insisted he take his son with him, and he started beating his own son. And the Prophet had no choice but to accept it. He just signed the treaty, and Suhail was technically, he was correct. He had to return. The son had to go with his father. The Muslims are also standing and watching, and they are, what's the word? Astonished? No, not astonished. They're just upset. They want to do something. There's just one man. They could easily overpower him, but they can't. They've just signed a treaty, and he's the ambassador. So he's beating up his son. So Sayyidina Umar sees that, and of course he doesn't agree with the last part of the treaty, and he tries his best to get closer to Abu Jandal, hand him over, get him to take his sword from him to strike his own father. Abu Jandal didn't do it, and he went, surrendered to his father, and they went back to Mecca. As I said, Sayyidina Umar did not objected to especially the last part of the treaty, and he sort of had, not exactly an argument, but he had it wasn't a very pleasant conversation with the Prophet. He said, "Are we not, following the true path? Are you not the Prophet of Allah? Are we not? Did you not tell us that we will perform Umrah?" The Prophet is answering him. He says, "Yes, I am the Prophet. We are on the true path." And then when he asked him, "Did you not say we will perform Umrah?" And the Prophet said, "I did not say we will perform Umrah this year." He said, "Yes, we will perform Umrah, but not this year." So Sayyidina Umar didn't fully accept the Prophet's answers, and he went to Sayyidina Abu Bakr. He repeated the same conversation with Sayyidina Abu Bakr. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr was similar to the Prophet in the way he was in his thinking. He gave the same answers, roughly the same answers that the Prophet gave. And it was after that Sayyidina Umar had no choice. He had to accept it. He didn't like the treaty, but he had to accept it. In fact, all the Muslims with him, the Prophet, did not like the treaty. And it was time then that the Prophet was going to end he was in a state of ihram. He was going to end that state of ihram by shaving his head and storing I'm not sure, a camel or sheep. And he ordered the Muslims to do that, and they all disobeyed him. He repeated the order 3 times. They did not obey him. So the Prophet is very upset. He goes into his tent to consult his wife, Sayyidah Salama, radiallahu anha, and she told him to go and do it himself, to shave his head and slaughter the animal. and when the other Muslims seeing him do it, they would do the same. And last thing I mentioned was Abu Basir. So soon after the treaty was signed and the Muslims returned back to Medina, one person from Mecca named Abu Basir managed to escape and went to Medina to convert, or I'm not sure if he was already converted, and he wanted to join the Muslims, and the Meccans already sent 2 men to capture him. They went all the way to Medina. The Prophet had no choice to hand Abu Basir over to those 2 men. After they left Medina, Abu Basir managed to overpower one of the men and kill him, and the other man runs away and goes to Medina, goes to the Prophet for protection. Abu Basir runs after him. And they reach Medina, and they go to the Prophet, ﷺ, and Abu Basir tells the Prophet, you have not done anything wrong, you have lived up to the treaty, and I am here of my own free will. The treaty does not apply to me, and I will, I will go and fight the Meccans, basically. So he goes into the desert and he starts attacking the Qurayshi caravans, because now there's a peace treaty. Caravans now are able to travel from Mecca without being attacked by the Muslims. They're able to travel to Syria. But now Abu Basir is now attacking these caravans, and he's even joined by other people similar to him, other runaways who want to join the Muslims. They join Abu Basir and they form a small group and they start attacking these caravans. Quraysh now realized that they now want to change the treaty. So they go to the Prophet, ask him to change that fourth part of the treaty, saying anybody who wants to defect to the Muslims is free to do so. The Muslims do not have to return him. This happened soon after the treaty. So the Treaty of Hudaybiyah is a milestone in Islamic history, because number one, Quraysh finally accepted the Muslims as a legitimate entity, as a nation, and they were able to negotiate with them on equal terms. They gave them sort of like equal status. But there are a number of other reasons, other things, but that was the main one. The Quraysh finally recognized the Muslims as an entity, and they were ready to go into peace negotiations with them. Because of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, now there was a peace treaty, and people were able to ally themselves with either side, the Muslims or Quraysh. Up until then, this is the 6th year, I believe, of the Hijrah, 3,000 people had converted to Islam. Next 2 years after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, the rate of conversion increased, say 7,000 converted in the next 2 years because of this treaty. The Muslims were able to form new alliances with other tribes, and the news about this establishment of an Islamic nation, a state, spread not just in the Arabian Peninsula, but to other nations around the region. Even some of the elite people in Mecca themselves, they will start to seriously think about converting to Islam, such as Khalid ibn al-Walid, Amr ibn al-As, Uthman ibn Talha radiallahu anhum. And on top of that, now that the Prophet had been able to secure, I guess that's the right word, the southern flank, so he was no longer afraid of being attacked from the south by Quraysh. He could now divert his attention to other matters, other people who are tribes or whatever, they were threatening the Muslims, such as the Jews, for example. Now, the Prophet, soon after he arrived from Hudaybiyah, he starts writing letters to the leaders, the emperors, the kings and emperors of the region. So these are some of the people he wrote to: the king of Abyssinia, the governor of Egypt, the Roman emperor, the Persian emperor, and some rulers of the kingdoms, Arab kingdoms. Now, these letters that the Prophet wrote were not for establishing diplomatic ties. They were mostly for da'wah. The Prophet had made da'wah to the people in the Arabian Peninsula. Now he's making da'wah to the people outside the Arabian Peninsula. One of them, the king of Abyssinia, Najashi, converted to Islam, but soon after he was overthrown. So he received that letter, and the messenger, his letter to him. Najashi was probably a true believer and of the oneness of Allah. He was probably didn't accept the Trinity as in Christianity, and he converted. This is the governor of Egypt, and that's apparently that's the image of the letter that was sent to the governor of Egypt from the Prophet. It's very difficult to read, but you can barely say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and then maybe Muhammad Rasulullah at the top line. So Muqawqis, the governor of Egypt, Egypt was a Roman province. Muqawqis was also a good natured person. He treated the messenger the Prophet sent with a letter very, very well, very politely. He even gave him presents, and he even said to this messenger that he knew that there was a new messenger was coming, a new messenger from Allah, but that he thought he would appear in Syria, not in Mecca. But he did not convert. Heraclius, the emperor, the Roman emperor. This was it's an interesting story. So possibly before the messenger arrived from the Prophet, Abu Sufyan had traveled there with a caravan, and I think he was in Gaza at the time, and Heraclius was in Jerusalem, and Heraclius had heard stories of this new prophet. So he found out that there was an Arab a caravan from the Arabian Peninsula in Gaza, and he had them brought before him in Jerusalem, and he started interrogating them. And the person amongst the person with that caravan was Abu Sufyan. So he has a conversation with Abu Sufyan. He's asking him about the Prophet, questions about him. What do you know about him? Is he an honest person? Is anybody known anything bad about him? Is he a liar? He's having a conversation. He's interrogating him basically to find out more about the Prophet. Abu Sufyan is giving him answers, and each answer he's giving him is telling the truth. He says the Prophet is related to him through marriage, because the Prophet had married Abu Sufyan's daughter. He was an honest person. Nabi knew him the Prophet to be dishonest. He was very truthful, etc., etc., etc. Abu Sufyan later said he tried his best to say something bad about the Prophet, and he couldn't. And in the end, he said, we've just signed a peace treaty with him, and I don't know if they're going to comply with the treaty or not. That's the only bad thing he could manage to say. Maybe he tried to give some doubt as to whether Muslims would comply with the treaty. And then that was when the messenger with the letter arrived to the Roman emperor, and the letter is read to the emperor. It's probably translated from Arabic to the Latin or whatever, Greek. And Heraclius realizes that he comes to the conclusion that the Prophet is a true prophet from Allah. And he says to Abu Sufyan, if he is a true prophet, he will control this land that I'm sitting on right now. He will control all this land. Later, Heraclius doesn't convert, but later he has a private conversation with the archbishop, so a high-ranking bishop, a man named Seerah. And Seerah, the archbishop, tells him, yes, he himself believes in the Prophet, and that he himself is going to convert to Islam. Seerah goes out in front of the people in the court, because they were having a private conversation. So he comes out and speaks to the others. He announces his conversion to Islam, and that's when the people gang up on him and kill him, beat him to death. And this is a high-ranking person, archbishop in the church. And of course, that scared the emperor. If the people were willing to do that to the archbishop, what would they do to him? And he's nowhere near as pious or as respected as the archbishop. I believe he gave some gifts, and he said he wasn't going to convert, but he was afraid that if he would convert, that there'll be people revolt against him, overthrow him, maybe kill him. The Persian emperor, again from the movie. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this particular, how the scene is, but in the movie, what did he say? I thought I put it. Okay. In the movie, he says, أنت جلف من جلف الصحراء جئت لتعلم كيف عاهل الفرس كيف يركع, which I think is not correct. He's saying to the messenger says, you're just a barbarian from the desert. You've come here to teach the king of the Persians how to perform ruku'ah. What he actually said, the translation would be, in the letter, the Prophet, the way that the letter was written, the Prophet said, "Min Muhammad Rasulullah ila Kisra Adim al-Furs." He was angry, the Persian emperor was angry that the Prophet had put his own name first before the Persian emperor's name. He said, how dare you do that? He gets the letter and tears it up into, shreds it. Something so superficial, it's just a stupid reaction compared to the Roman emperor and the Egyptian governor or the Abyssinian king. He treasured it up, and when the messenger went back to the Prophet to report what the Persian emperor did, he told him, he tore up the letter. The Prophet said, may Allah tear up his kingdom. That's not even, tearing up the letter was not enough. What does he do? The Kisra, the emperor, he sends a message to the governor of Yemen. Yemen was under Persian rule. He tells him to send 2 men to capture the Prophet and bring him as a prisoner before the Persian emperor. That's how the Persians, even not just the Persians, the Romans saw the Arabs, saw them as an inferior race. They are nothing. So, and he sends the message to the governor, Bahram, I can't remember his name. He sends those 2 men to Medina, and they meet the Prophet, and they tell him this is what we're supposed to do. The Prophet tells them, I'll meet you again tomorrow morning. He says, we'll speak again tomorrow. So that night, the Prophet receives revelation, and the next morning he speaks to those 2 men, and he says, last night, my God killed your God. He says to those 2 messengers, my God, my Lord, my Rabb killed your Rabb, your Lord. So what happened is that the emperor's own son overthrew him, he killed his own father and replaced him as king of, and exactly that's when the Prophet said. The Prophet tells that to the 2 messengers, and they're shocked. But they go back to Yemen to tell the governor what had happened. And the governor receives, a confirmation from Persia, back from Persia, that this is what happened. And he is able to find out that this is exactly the same, on the same night that the Prophet mentioned to those 2 men. And that, if in the end, would cause the governor of Yemen, the Persian governor, to convert to Islam, and all the Persians and those 2 men, those 2 soldiers, to convert to Islam. They did worship him, yes. Yes, correct. That's the map of the Persian Empire, the Sasanian Persian Empire. That's the dark area. And it's Yemen, which was under their rule. And this is just what they had a war with the Romans, and they conquered all this land. And that, again, mentioned in the Quran. And over a number of years, the Persian Romans took back the land they lost. Now, that's another interesting story is that the Persians, when they had the war with the Romans, they took Jerusalem, Palestine, and Egypt, and went all the way up to Constantinople. And they took from Jerusalem what the Christians thought was the true cross which they believed that Jesus was crucified on. The Persians took it. And when the Romans fought back and took back the lands they lost to the Persians, they found the true cross according to them. So the Persian emperor, as a sign, because he was a very religious, he was a person, religious Christian. He carried the true cross, or what they believe was the true cross, and walked all the way to Jerusalem to return the true cross back to the church in Jerusalem. So these are the events that happened shortly after the Muslims returned back from the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Nearly a month after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, and about a year after the Battle of Ahzab, the Prophet now sees the enemy is Khaybar, the Jews of Khaybar. So Khaybar, 1 year prior, the Jews of Khaybar, in addition to the tribe of Bani Nadir, organized the army of the Ahzab army. They came 1 year prior and laid siege to Medina, city of Medina, 1 year prior. So they formed an army of 10,000 with the intention of exterminating Islam, killing all the Muslims. Now it was time for the Jews to be punished. The Jews had organized that Ahzab army. Khaybar is a long distance away. It's about 172 kilometers from Medina. But after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, the Prophet was now free to send armies to Khaybar to fight, because before he couldn't. He couldn't just send an army out and leave Medina unprotected. Quraysh might come back, the Arab tribes might come back and attack Medina, and there's no army to defend Medina. There's a problem. So he signs the treaty, and then he's able to march to Khaybar with an army of only about 1,500. It's a relatively small army. And it's small because Khaybar is not just one fortress, it's a number of fortresses. It's a large settlement. And each one is well built fortification. Some of them are on top of a hill or mountain. And each one is well stocked with food, with weapons, and very difficult to fight. The Prophet only marched with about 1,500. The Prophet tried to march quickly to Khaybar to not give the Jews a chance to probably prepare themselves for defending Khaybar. Yes, the Prophet also said those who were with him at the what's it called, the Half not Hudaybiyah, sorry, the pledge they made, Half al-Radwan, before Hudaybiyah, how the Muslims all pledged to defend the Prophet with their lives. The Prophet said those who were present there would go with him to fight. He said that because the munafiq, the hypocrites in Medina, once they found out what the Prophet was going to march to Khaybar, they tried their best to inform the Jews, tell them, prepare yourselves, the Muslims are coming to fight you. He didn't want the munafiqeen, the hypocrites, to march with them and cause more problems for the Muslims. The Muslims arrive, and as I said, there are a number of fortifications. So I'll give you, that's one of the forts. As I mentioned, it's well built, it's on top of a mountain, difficult to conquer. And this is a map of Khaybar. So these are the outer fortifications outside, the inner fortifications here, and these dark areas are hills. And that's Qamus, which is this one here. Very difficult to fight, to enter and conquer. And this is where they lived. It's not a desert. It's actually, you can see trees there. It was good agricultural land, and the Jews were able to raise crops and live a relatively comfortable life and sell and make money, commerce.
Do you know what the green area is?
Up here? No, I don't. Maybe it's a fort. The first fort is Na'im, and this is an interesting story. The Muslims arrive, and Na'im is a very difficult fort to fight, to conquer. The Jews send out one of their best fighters, a man named Marhab. He was supposedly a giant, a big, strong man, and a big giant. First, has a duel with Amr ibn al-Aqwa. Amr ibn al-Aqwa, while he's fighting Marhab, he swings his sword and accidentally hits his own leg with it. And he starts bleeding, and he ends up bleeding to death. And the Muslims were sad for him. They thought he committed suicide because he killed himself literally killed himself by his own sword. The Prophet said it was an accident. He is a shaheed, and he did not commit suicide. So the Prophet Sayyidina Ali comes out and fights Marhab and is able to defeat him, kill him. The next fort, the Muslims eventually conquer Na'im and then go on to the next fort. They're conquering each fort one by one. Next one is, the name is As-Sa'b ibn Mu'adh. That's the name of the fort. The Muslims had arrived with little food. They were hungry, they were starving. So, what do? The Muslims do? They slaughter an animal, one of their animals, and start cooking the meat. Anybody know what that animal was? Sorry? No. Donkey. So they slaughter the donkeys, or one donkey, I don't know if it was one, and they start cooking the meat. And the smell of the meat cooking is coming out, and the Muslims are smelling, and they're starving. And the Prophet tells them, once he realizes that this is donkey meat, he tells this to throw it away. And he even tells them to destroy the pots they're cooking the meat in. And they're starving. So the Muslims asking, yes, we'll get rid of the meat, but can we, instead of destroy the pots, can we just wash them? The Prophet is happy with that. And the Prophet then makes a dua. اللهم إنك قد عرفت حالهم أن ليست بهم قوة أن ليس بيدي شيء أعطيهم إياه فافتح عليهم أعظم حصونها عنهم غناء وأكثرها طعاما وودكا. So the Prophet is saying to Allah, you know the situation of the Muslims. They don't have a lot of strength. They're hungry. The Prophet himself, he says, I have nothing to give them. So he says, open for them. Allow them to conquer the strongest of their forts that has wealth and has food and meat. And that second fort, As-Sa'b ibn Mu'adh, had the food. Once the Muslims conquered it, they found a huge amount of food. They were able to eat and fill their stomachs. Qarat al-Zubayr is the next fort. Again, it was a difficult fort. They're all difficult. They laid siege, and then all of a sudden, somebody from inside the fort, a Jew, comes out, and he meets the Prophet and tells him, I will show you where, because they are well stocked with water and food. I'll show you where the source of the water is. So Muslims can block it from entering, so that they could have the water. They shows him, and they divert the water, take the water away from them, and they are able to fight and defeat and conquer that Qalat al-Zubayr. The next fort is An-Nizar. The Muslims found a catapult in one of the other forts that they'd already conquered, and they used the catapult to destroy a section of the wall, so they could breach it and enter the fort and conquer it. They conquer a few more forts, and then the rest of Khaybar decide to surrender. And they negotiate with the Muslims. They say, we'll surrender, but please allow us to stay here. We'll work the land, and we'll share half our crops with you. And the Muslims said, we'll allow you to stay on condition that we have retained the right to evict them, get rid of them at any time. One of the captives from the other forts was Seerah Lesson, the daughter of Hayy ibn Akhtab. The Prophet married her and she had converted to Islam. And even though they had surrendered, the Jews still wanted to kill the Prophet. I think it's a well-known story that a Jewish woman had cooked some meat and put some poison with it and presented to the Prophet and the Muslims to eat. The Prophet, I think, did eat some of it, and another Sahabi ate from it, the Bishr ibn al-Bara, and he died from eating the poison. The Prophet did not die, but he later interrogated the Jews. He said, he was asking them about the meat, and they admitted that it placed poison with the meat, in the meat. So the woman who presented that meat was executed, only because, not because the Prophet himself forgave her for that she'd given put poison in the meat, but because another Muslim had eaten the meat and died from it, that she was responsible for it, she was executed for it. Amongst the spoils that the Muslims had taken from the other forts was some Torah scrolls of the Torah. The Prophet, even though he didn't accept what was written in the Torah, he returned them undamaged back to the Jews to use and read or whatever. So that's Khaybar. As I said, it's a number of fortifications. The Muslims, and very difficult to conquer. The Muslims, with Allah's help, of course, managed to conquer them, and it was a huge victory. So the Muslims were now, after the Battle of Al-Ahzab, Muslim power was only increasing over time, and because of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah as well. Now the conversion rate had increased. Muslim power was increasing, the population was increasing, people were coming to Medina, moving to Medina, to increase the size of the Muslim community there. And inshallah, we're about to start talking about the conquest of Mecca itself. And we'll talk about the road leading to the conquest of Mecca and the conquest of Mecca itself. Has anybody got any questions or any comments or anything else for tonight?
The Prophet said during his passing away that he can still feel the poison that
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So it was kind of part of what killed him, I guess.
Yeah, true. جزاكم الله الخير. فستذكر ما أقول لكم وفوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.